If someone had told me that my life would be at risk because of persons who believed they have the right to live while everyone else doesn't, I would have laughed it off. But when it happened to me, laughing was the last thing on my mind. I never thought my life could change so drastically overnight. I lived a simple life with my father, an elder brother, in a quiet neighborhood where the most excitement we had was the occasional visit from extended family. But everything changed one night when I had a dream, no, a nightmare, that left me shaking to my core. In the dream, we were summoned by a man I later discovered to be my uncle. His native doctor had summoned my father, brother, and me to a massive, imposing castle perched on a hill overlooking the city. This wasn't just any castle, it was my uncle's, a man of immense wealth and power. My uncle was known throughout the city. His connections were endless, from politicians to powerful businessmen. Everyone seemed to owe him something. I had heard stories of his grand lifestyle, his luxurious cars, and his enormous influence, but I had never been to his home. Yet, in my dream, I found myself there, standing in its intimidating shadow. As we approached the castle, the grandeur of it all overwhelmed me. The gates were made of solid iron, intricately designed with symbols I didn't recognize. Inside the compound was vast, with manicured lawns and statues that seemed almost alive in the moonlight. But the beauty of the place was overshadowed by an ominous feeling that clung to the air. We were led to a secluded area within the compound where a native doctor sat on the ground surrounded by various ritual items, bones, feathers, and pots filled with mysterious liquids. He chanted in a language I didn't understand, his voice low and menacing. As he turned to face us, his eyes locked onto mine. He studied me for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. You, he said, his voice as cold as ice, are the one chosen for the sacrifice. Come forward. I felt a chill run down my spine. My feet was rooted to the spot, but somehow I managed to shake my head and say no. The native doctor's expression darkened. He pointed at me, his eyes burning with an intensity that terrified me. We shall see in 7 days, he said, each word dripping with certainty. 7 days. Suddenly, I heard a name in that place. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding in my chest. The dream had been so vivid, so real, that I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. My room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. I lay there for a moment, trying to convince myself it was just a dream. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It felt like a warning. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept replaying the dream over and over again. Finally, I decided I had to tell someone. I needed to make sense of it all. I went to my father, hoping he could help me understand. Dad, I began hesitantly. I had a strange dream last night. We were at a big house, and there was a man. He looked like someone I've seen before, but I don't know where. And while we were there, I heard a name. My father listened quietly. As I described the man in the dream, I mentioned his name. He was silent for a moment. His brow furrowed in thought. That is your uncle, he said, finally. He is very rich and lives in that big castle on the hill. You've probably seen him a few times at family gatherings. My heart skipped a beat. So the man in my dream was my uncle. I didn't know much about him, but I knew he was powerful and had connections everywhere. Could it be possible that the dream was trying to tell me something about him? A cold realization washed over me. Dad, I slowly said, I think he uses people for sacrifices. He wants to use me. My father looked at me, his face a mix of concern and confusion. What are you saying? It was just a dream. I know it sounds crazy, I admitted, but it didn't feel like a normal dream. It felt like a warning. The man in the dream, the native doctor, said I was chosen for the sacrifice, and he said I had 7 days. My father's expression darkened. He was a man of faith, and he knew that sometimes dreams carried messages. We need to pray, he said firmly. But let's also talk to Pastor. He will know what to do. Later that day, we went to see the pastor. As I recounted the dream to him, his face grew more serious with each detail. When I finished, he looked at me with grave concern. Your uncle plans to use you as a sacrifice in 7 days, he said bluntly. But he won't succeed. God is with you. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, he continued. Go and pray with Psalms 91. If you don't pray fervently, he will succeed. His words sent a shiver down my spine. The pastor wasn't one to exaggerate or jump to conclusions. If he was saying this, it meant he believed there was real danger. What should I do? I asked, feeling a mix of fear and desperation. You need to pray, Pastor said firmly. Pray like you've never prayed before. Ask God to protect you, to break any plan the enemy has set against you. I nodded, feeling faith stir up inside me. For the first time, I felt confident. I wasn't going to let fear rule my life. I wasn't going to let my uncle take my life like a chicken. I am not for sacrifice. That night, I began to pray. At first, it was difficult to focus. My mind kept wandering back to the dream, to the image of the native doctor pointing at me, and to the ominous words, 7 days. But I pushed through the distractions, praying to God for protection. I prayed for hours until my voice was hoarse and my knees ached. I wasn't going to give up. The days that followed were filled with constant prayers. I barely ate or slept. My father and brother joined me in prayer, and even the pastor came over to pray with us. The tension in the house was palpable, but I refused to let fear consume me. I believed in the power of prayer, and I was determined to make it through those 7 days. As each day passed, I felt a growing sense of peace. I knew God was with me, that He was hearing my prayers. I clung to that belief, refusing to let doubt take hold. Finally, the seventh day arrived. This was the day the native doctor had spoken of, the day I was supposed to die. But as the hours passed, nothing happened. By the time evening came, I knew I was safe. With a sense of gratitude, I thanked God for keeping me safe and for hearing my prayers. My faith had been tested, and I had come out stronger and more determined than ever. But the story didn't end there. Some days later, news of my uncle's illness and an emergency trip to India spread. Later, we received news that my uncle had died while abroad. The news spread quickly through the family, and everyone was shocked. My uncle, the man who seemed untouchable, and had everything was finally gone. But deep down, I knew the truth. My prayers had saved me. My uncle, unable to take my life, had lost his own. I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sorrow. He was family after all. But his death confirmed everything the pastor had said. As I look back on what happened, I am filled with a sense of awe and gratitude. This experience taught me that no one is destined to be a sacrifice. If there is someone willing to pray, there is a God who answers. My story is proof evil can be overcome, and that faith and prayer are powerful shields against any threat. You are not for sacrifice. Trust in God, and no evil plan will ever succeed against you.
Thanks for watching. Support my channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, and turning on notifications to stay updated on new stories.